In this episode of the PBD podcast, the host discusses various topics and stories that are currently making headlines. The episode begins with a quote from Ray Dalio, a hedge fund legend, who states that there is now a 50% chance of World War III due to the Israel-Hamas conflict and other global tensions. This is followed by a discussion on how this conflict could potentially spread and the harmful effects it could have on the world. The host also mentions Jamie Dimon, CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, who agrees with Dalio's assessment and believes that the world is currently in a dangerous state. The host raises the question of how the current state of the world would be different under the presidency of Donald Trump, suggesting that Trump's approach to international relations may have prevented such conflicts. The conversation then shifts to the recent conflict between Israel and Hamas, with the host highlighting a controversial statement made by a professor at Cornell University. The professor described Hamas' recent terror attacks as exhilarating and exciting, which sparked outrage and condemnation. The host also discusses the impact of this conflict on Ivy League schools, as several prominent donors have withdrawn their support due to the university's failure to condemn Hamas. The host then delves into the ideological divide within the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. He mentions the ongoing conflicts between various conservative figures, such as Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson, as well as the divisions within the Democratic Party regarding support for Hamas. The host suggests that these divisions reflect a larger struggle between different ideas and values within American society. The episode also covers the actions of billionaires who are removing their financial support from Ivy League schools, citing their failure to condemn Hamas. This leads to a discussion on the influence of money in academia and the potential consequences of this withdrawal of funding. The hosts continue by addressing the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas, with Bette David questioning how Israel did not anticipate the attack by Hamas. He mentions an article from Forbes that accuses Charlie Kirk of spreading conspiracy theories about Israel's knowledge of the attack. However, Bette David also highlights another article from Forbes that states the CIA and other Middle Eastern allies had warned of the conflict in September and October, suggesting that Israel could have prevented it. The conversation then shifts to the potential for World War III, with Bette David expressing concern about the high tensions and the possibility of catastrophic events. He emphasizes the need for people to consider both sides of the story and not jump to conclusions based on emotions. Bette David also mentions the danger of deep fake videos, which can manipulate public opinion and incite hatred and violence. The hosts discuss the issue of immigration and the need for bipartisan solutions. They mention the situation at the U.S.-Mexico border and the recent discovery of 4 Iranians considered a terrorist threat trying to cross into the U.S. They compare the approach of Egypt, which strictly controls its border with Gaza, to the U.S.'s more lenient immigration policies. The conversation then turns to the role of Egypt in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Bette David questions why Egypt is not allowing more civilians to cross the border and suggests that a refugee camp should be set up in the Sinai Peninsula to provide a safe haven for Palestinians. He emphasizes the importance of Egypt's role in the region and the need for them to open the border to prevent a humanitarian crisis. The hosts also discuss the different perspectives on the conflict, with Bette David highlighting the countries that are pro-Israel and those that are pro-Hamas. He mentions that Egypt, despite having peace with Israel, has not taken a strong stance on the conflict. Bette David emphasizes the need for people to consider both sides and not blindly support one side or the other. The conversation continues with a discussion on the responsibility of leaders and the potential for them to sacrifice their own people for political gain. Bette David raises the question of whether it is possible that leaders like Netanyahu or Bush Jr. would allow events to happen in order to unify their countries or justify military action. He acknowledges that it is a valid question but cautions against drawing conclusions without concrete evidence. The discussion continues with a focus on the situation in Ukraine and the potential consequences of NATO defending Russia. The hosts express concern about the fate of Ukraine if NATO were to defend Russia, suggesting that Ukraine would be quickly overrun. They also speculate about the possibility of giving Russia $100 billion and the potential impact on Ukraine's sovereignty. The conversation then shifts to the Israel-Hamas conflict, with the hosts discussing the potential outcomes and implications of an attack on Gaza by Israel. They consider the involvement of other countries, such as Iran and Hezbollah, and question the credibility of threats made by Hamas. The hosts also debate the response of Tucker Carlson, who compared the Israel tragedy to drug abuse deaths in the United States, with Ben Shapiro strongly condemning Carlson's comments. The discussion then turns to the U.S.-Mexico border, with the hosts expressing frustration over the lack of action to secure the border. They argue for the need to close the border for 1 year and implement stricter immigration policies. They criticize the Biden administration for not taking stronger measures to address the border crisis and suggest that the situation will eventually lead to a major security threat. The conversation continues with a discussion about the easing of sanctions on Venezuelan oil in exchange for a commitment from the Maduro regime to hold a fair presidential election. The hosts express skepticism about the effectiveness of this agreement and question whether Maduro will follow through on his commitments. The podcast continues with a discussion on supply chain security and geopolitical dynamics in the lithium market. The hosts talk about the projected commencement of mining operations in 2026 to extract lithium from claystone in an energy-efficient and low-acid consumption manner. They highlight the significance of this development for the average American, emphasizing the importance of energy independence and the ability to support other countries with energy needs. The conversation then shifts to the state of the U.S. military. The hosts discuss a report that reveals nearly 70% of active military members are overweight, with the obesity rate within the military doubling over the past decade. They express concern over the impact of this on military recruitment and readiness, emphasizing the need for addressing this issue and maintaining high standards in the military. Next, the hosts discuss Jada Pinkett Smith's recent book, titled, Worthy. They mention that Will Smith, her husband, expressed shock and heartbreak over the revelations in the book. They question the decision to publicly share personal information and suggest that it may be a marketing scheme to sell books. They also speculate on the dynamics of Will and Jada's relationship, considering the possibility that Will may be a victim in the situation.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe.